Hello, Virgo. They watched. For a long time, they simply watched, not passively, not indifferently, with the particular concentrated attention of someone who wanted to move but had made a decision, conscious or otherwise, to stay exactly where they were, to hold the feeling at arm's length, to keep the want contained within the borders of something manageable, something that didn't require vulnerability, something that couldn't be refused because it was never quite offered. You may have sensed it, that quality of attention that never quite announced itself but was somehow always there in the way certain interactions carried more weight than their surface suggested, in the way this person occupied a particular frequency in your awareness without ever giving you a clear reason to place them there. Something that registered without resolving. Something that felt significant but remained frustratingly just below the threshold of the definable. That was not your imagination. And what has been quietly building behind that restraint, behind all that carefully maintained distance, is now reaching a point where holding it back any further is becoming something this person simply cannot sustain. The question worth starting with is not what changed, it is why they held back in the first place. Because restraint of this kind, the deliberate, sustained kind, in the presence of something genuinely felt, does not come from indifference. Indifference requires no effort. Indifference simply is. It does not need to be maintained or managed or consciously reinforced day after day in the face of a pull that keeps reasserting itself, regardless of how many times it is pushed back down. What looks like indifference from the outside, but costs something on the inside, is almost always fear wearing a very convincing disguise. And the specific fear that generates this kind of prolonged restraint, the holding back, the watching from a careful distance, the wanting without moving, tends to be one of a small number of. Sometimes it is the fear of rejection, the particular vulnerability of extending yourself clearly towards someone and receiving a no that you then have to carry in every subsequent interaction. Some people find that specific discomfort so intolerable that they choose the dull, chronic ache of unexpressed feeling over the sharp, finite risk of being told directly that what they feel is not returned. Sometimes it is the fear of disruption of what happens to an existing dynamic, a friendship, a professional proximity, a social arrangement, when feeling is named and the careful equilibrium of what was collapses into the uncertain territory of what might be. These situations require a particular kind of courage because the cost of moving is not only possible rejection, but the potential loss of something already valuable. And that calculation, for certain people, freezes them in place for far longer than anyone on the outside would consider reasonable. And sometimes, perhaps most interestingly, it is the fear of what happens if it works, the fear of actually getting what you want, of stepping into a connection that matters enough to lose with someone who sees you clearly enough to also see your edges, your contradictions, the places where you are not yet who you intend to be. Genuine intimacy is one of the most terrifying things a human being can move toward. And for certain people, the safer choice has always been to want from a distance rather than risk the particular exposure of being truly known. Something shifted. It may not be immediately obvious what it was. These shifts rarely announce their causes with any clarity. But something in the interior landscape of this person, some calculation, some threshold, some quietly accumulating weight of unlived feeling, reached a point that changed the equation. Perhaps they watched you move through something and saw in the way you handled it a quality they had not previously allowed themselves to fully register. Perhaps distance gave them a clarity that proximity had been obscuring, the particular sharpness of vision that only comes when something you have been taking for granted begins to feel genuinely at risk of disappearing. Perhaps they simply ran out of reasons that felt sufficient to justify continuing to hold back something that had grown too large to be comfortably contained. Whatever the mechanism, and the specific mechanism matters less than its result, the internal permission that was previously withheld has now, quietly and perhaps irreversibly, been granted. And when a person who has been holding themselves back with genuine effort finally releases that restraint, when the energy that has been compressed behind all that careful self-management is finally allowed to move, what follows tends to be considerably more intense than anything that might have emerged had they simply acted on the feeling when it first arrived. Restraint, when it finally breaks, does not break gently. Let's talk about what this pursuit is likely to feel like from your side of it. Because being pursued genuinely, clearly, by someone who has decided without reservation that they are no longer interested in the possibility of you remaining at a distance is its own complex experience. There is an undeniable satisfaction in it, something that operates beneath rational assessment in a register that is older and more animal than the carefully considered frameworks through which most adults prefer to process their emotional lives. Being wanted specifically, deliberately, without ambiguity, touches something that does not require sophisticated justification. It simply feels like being recognized, like being seen, like mattering to someone in the particular, personal, irreplaceable way that genuine desire implies. And after a period of wondering, after whatever time you may have spent in the ambiguity of this person's previous restraint, trying to read signals that were simultaneously too present to dismiss and too contained to act on the clarity of being pursued directly, may arrive with a relief that surprises you with its intensity. But there is another dimension to this experience that is worth examining with equal honesty. When someone pursues you who previously held back, the dynamic between you carries a history, a specific textured history of all the moments in which their feeling existed but was not expressed, all the interactions that were shaped on their side by something you may not have been fully aware of, all the times the air between you held something that neither of you quite named. That history does not disappear when the pursuit begins. It becomes part of the context in which everything that follows unfolds, and navigating it well with clarity rather than reactivity, with genuine self-awareness rather than simply the excitement of the moment, requires you to be more present with yourself than the energy of being pursued sometimes allows. Because pursuit is compelling, and compelling things have a tendency to move faster than wisdom. Here is something that rarely gets said in reflections like this one, but that may be the most genuinely useful observation in everything that follows. The fact that someone wants you even intensely, even clearly, even after a prolonged period of restraint, that speaks to the seriousness of what they feel is information about them. It is not by itself a complete argument for anything. What matters is not only that they want you, What matters is how they want you. Whether the pursuit as it unfolds reflects a genuine regard for who you actually are, your complexity, your needs, your pace, the specific texture of how you move through connection, or whether it reflects primarily the relief of finally releasing something long contained with you as the object of that release rather than the subject of it. These are very different things, and they tend to become distinguishable fairly quickly if you are paying the right kind of attention. The person who wants you in the first sense will pursue with intensity, but also with attentiveness. They will move toward you with energy, but they will also listen. They will express what they feel, but they will also remain genuinely curious about what you feel. The pursuit will feel like it is oriented toward you, toward the actual specific person you are, rather than toward the resolution of something that has been building in them independently of who you happen to be. The person who wants you in the second sense will pursue with equal intensity, but the attentiveness will be more intermittent. The energy will be high, but not always well calibrated to what the situation is actually asking for. And there will be moments, subtle ones, easy to miss in the excitement of being so clearly desired, where the pursuit seems to be running on its own momentum rather than remaining in genuine contact with you. Neither of these observations is a verdict. People contain multitudes, and the early stages of any pursuit are rarely the final word on anything, but they are worth noticing. Worth tracking quietly, without allowing the tracking to collapse the experience into something purely analytical. Feel everything and notice everything, both at once. This is the particular skill this moment is asking of you. There is a broader reflection available in this situation beyond the immediate experience of being pursued by a specific person. Something about you has been generating this, not manufacturing it, not orchestrating it, but generating it in the way that certain qualities of presence naturally generate certain kinds of responses from the world. The fact that someone held back for as long as they did and is now releasing that restraint with the kind of energy that the title of this reflection is pointing toward says something about the specific gravity of who you are. Not everyone creates this kind of dynamic. Not everyone has the quality of presence that causes another person to feel something. They then spend considerable time and energy trying to manage, contain, hold at a distance, and ultimately fail to suppress entirely. That is not a common experience. And the people for whom it is common tend to be people who carry something in them that is genuinely difficult to walk away from. Something real. Something that registers at a level deeper than the casual, the convenient, the easily replaceable. You may not always feel like that person. The internal experience of being you with all its uncertainty, its self-questioning, its very human moments of wondering whether you are enough and for whom and in what ways rarely matches the external impression you leave on people who encounter you with any degree of genuine attention. But the gap between those two things is real, and what is currently unfolding in your orbit is, among other things, evidence of it. The chase that is about to begin is not random. It is not circumstantial. It is the direct consequence of an impression you made, possibly without trying, possibly without fully realizing it, on a person who has spent considerable time attempting to convince themselves that what they felt was manageable. It was not manageable. And they have finally stopped pretending otherwise. What you do with what is coming, how you receive it, what you allow it to mean, where you permit it to lead, that is entirely yours to determine at your own pace, on your own terms, with the full awareness that being pursued, however flattering and however real, is only the beginning of a conversation. The more important conversation, the one about what you actually want, what you are genuinely ready for, and what kind of connection you are willing to show up for with everything you have, that one is between you and yourself. And it may be worth having sooner rather than later.